All right, I think we will get started. Again, my name is Eric Schneider. I'm with StraightUp Solar. I'm Director of Business Development here. And I want to thank you for joining us tonight for the 2024 Solar Policy Outlook. You're in for a very informative presentation with two of the leading solar policy experts in our region. I've had the pleasure of working with both of them and relying on their expertise. And I'm telling you, you guys are going to get some great insights tonight. A little background on StraightUp Solar. We're really proud to host this webinar because solar advocacy and education is at the core of our values as a company. For those of you who are not familiar with StraightUp Solar, we're a turnkey EPC firm, which means we do everything from soups to nuts, from design to engineering, to installation to service. We do it all for you, make it easy for you to go solar on your home or for your businesses. We're really proud that last year we just did our 3,000th installation since our founding in 2006, and really proud to be part of, we serve St. Louis, we serve Bloomington, Illinois, Northern Illinois, Central Illinois, and Southern Illinois. Really proud to serve those two state regions, putting in 65 megawatts of power over those nearly 20 years of our company here. The logos on the bottom, we're really proud to be part of these partnerships, but most importantly for tonight, really proud to be a member of the Illinois Solar Energy Association and a founding member of the Missouri Solar Energy Association at a state level. And then at the federal level, the Solar Energy Industry Association, which our speaker is from here. So let me introduce both of them. John Dolan is our executive director. John Dolan became the executive director of the Missouri Solar Energy Industry Association in August of 2022. He represents industry providers, stakeholders, and organizations which have come together through MOSEIA to promote the use and benefit of solar energy. He's responsible for the day-to-day operations of the association, legislative and regulatory advocacy, communications, member training and events, such as the world-famous Solar Summit that's going to occur in February in Jefferson City. John is currently in his 19th year as a trade association chief executive, and he previously served as a CEO for two large statewide healthcare trade associations in Missouri and New Jersey, and a specialty physician association in Florida. John is known as a leader who has garnered and held the trust of elected officials and association members with proven experience of working across the aisle, table, and the nation. John served for nearly a decade as a state legislator in the Missouri State Senate and House of Representatives. His Senate leadership included service as the Majority Caucus Chairman, Chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee, and a member of the Senate Aging, Health, and Families Committee. John's also a former major in the U.S. Army National Guard. His active duty service included support of the Operation Enduring Freedom as commander of the 70th Mobile Public Affairs Detachment, assigned to Joint Task Force Gitmo in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and other domestic and overseas missions. John's also, he's talking to us from Jefferson City, Missouri, and he's a graduate of the University of Missouri and a Master's of Art from Webster University. So thanks, John, for joining us tonight. We're going to lead off with Andrew Linhares, who is SEIA, which is the Solar Energy Industry Association. He's a senior manager for the Central Region and supervises regulatory and legislative matters impacting solar and storage policy across the Midwest, principally in Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Prior to joining SEIA in 2024, Andrew spent 12 years at Renew Missouri, a statewide clean energy advocacy group working to advance renewable and energy efficiency policy. Andrew served as a regional director and senior counsel for Renew Missouri, where he managed the St. Louis office and engaged with electric and gas utilities, state and local government regulators, elected officials, and solar and wind industry leaders. Andrew also spent years serving as the organization's staff attorney, litigating cases before the Missouri Public Service Commission and the Missouri courts. Andrew holds a JD from St. Louis University School of Law and a bachelor's degree in English from Truman State University, and he's speaking to us from his home in South City here. So with, let me just read my notes here. So today's presentation will cover federal policy and a Missouri legislative outlook. Specifically in the federal policy, Andrew's going to talk about the Inflation Reduction Act, some of the executive orders that were passed this week, and a look at the year ahead. John will talk about legislative initiatives that are being promoted by MOSEIA at the Capitol, specifically net metering, the registered solar contractor, and community solar. Each presentation will be about 15 minutes. Then we'll do a question and answer session here. I ask you to put your questions in the chat, and then I will present them to John and Andrew. They're very capable of handling a lot of topics here. Andrew, as I mentioned, he has a lot of work in Illinois. So if you have questions about Illinois, ask him in the chat. He won't necessarily cover them in his presentation. He's going to stick to federal policy, but you're interested in kind of knowing some of the things that are going on in Illinois policy, you can ask Andrew today. Also, I want to alert you to a companion to this webinar here. StraightUp Solar will be hosting a webinar on February 19th, another Outlook webinar on the 2025 Outlook. We're going to have our president and founder, Dr. Dane Glick, give his perspective of what 2025 looks like. And he'll be joined by Shannon Fulton, our vice president of pre-construction and a board member of the Illinois Solar Energy Association. So she will have a great update on the legislative activity that's going on in Springfield, Illinois here. So if you're interested specifically on Illinois topics, we can cover a little today, but definitely come back on February 19th and we'll send out that notice to get more in-depth detail on what's going on in Illinois. So with that, again, thank you, Andrew and John, for joining us today. I'm going to turn it over to Andrew to talk a little bit about the federal policy.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. StraightUp Solar and MOSEIA for having me. Great turnout. Good to see some familiar names there in the participants list. So I am with the Solar Energy Industries Association, which is your national trade association for solar and storage. Prior to that, I was with Renew Missouri for many years. So I'm very familiar with Missouri and now primarily working on Illinois. I'm the senior manager of the Central region, but that really means Midwest. We've carved off Texas to be its own region. And so I am focusing on Illinois, Michigan, as well as Missouri. So you can go to the next slide there, Eric. Okay, so some of the slides here are slightly, oh, there we go. Okay, I was going to say they're cut off, but looks good. So I want to go over some of the Inflation Reduction Act for you all. Now, this is not comprehensive. There's a bunch of stuff under the Inflation Reduction Act having to do with healthcare policy and oil and gas and stuff, but we really want to focus in on the clean energy investments here, which is, you know, $369 billion of the bill. This is the largest investment in climate and clean energy in the nation's history. And the bulk of it is in the form of these tax credits. And if you work in the solar industry, storage industry, the wind industry, energy efficiency, you're very familiar with some of these. You know, this includes extension of and increase of the ITC, along with some new adders for domestic content and energy communities and the like. That's supposed to say 10% for energy communities. In addition, you know, it creates an energy storage tax credit and a bunch of others. And, you know, direct pay ability. So this is a really big deal, not just because of the amounts, but because of the runway, right? It gave a decade plus of runway here so that businesses could spin up and invest. Real landmark moment for energy policy in the country. In addition, it has a bunch of appropriations, actual money appropriated to spend on stuff. This includes the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, relevant for solar. That's the Solar for All program, of which Missouri gets more than 150 million, Illinois as well. Grants for clean energy projects and contractor training, all sorts of stuff. There's the REAP grant program there. So a whole bunch of stuff under the Inflation Reduction Act that really was a sea change passed in 2022. You can go to the next slide there. Okay, so all that is to say, we are in absolute crisis for this. I mean, this is an all hands on deck situation. It is a very pressing time for this policy. Congress, obviously, along with the presidential election, Congress has flipped. Republicans, when they finally get all their members seated, will have a 5-vote majority in the House for 220 seats. In the Senate, they will have a fairly decent majority as well, although not a big enough majority to break the filibuster. There's been many attempts in the past to repeal the IRA, all of them fairly weak and symbolic. However, we have a new bill now in the House, HR 191, that represents a complete repeal of the IRA, right? This is very unlikely because there's a lot of useful stuff in there for a lot of people, not just the clean energy industries. But this is clearly something that is being considered. And the vehicle chosen for this is budget reconciliation, which we can talk about further, but basically what that means is you don't need to, it sidesteps cloture. You don't have to use the 60 vote threshold to break a filibuster, but it can only be used for items affecting the federal spending or the budget. Political context here, I think if you've been following the news and everything, I mean, Project 2025 was a big talking point during the election, but it's looking a little bit more realistic during the election. Republicans were distancing themselves, but I think you're seeing a lot of these policies show up at the state level and the federal level. It recommends a full-on repeal of the IRA, particularly the tax provisions, in order to clear the way for a fairly sweeping tax reform and reduction in taxes for the richest Americans and corporations. Also, there's been a rhetorical effort to link it to the Green New Deal, which is goes back many years, and it is a more of a conceptual or a branding exercise, but clearly they feel that this is a winning argument here. And really the big takeaway there is the tax cut. That is, as it was during the first Trump administration, will be the signature domestic priority of the new administration. And obviously, there is a lot of leeway you can give yourself if you're able to get rid of the IRA. So that is why the IRA is primarily targeted here, is because it allows a tax cut. Okay, you can go to the next slide there. So while there isn't really much to say on the Hill in terms of repealing the IRA, other than that bill that I said was introduced. We'll talk about budget reconciliation and what we could expect in a second. However, at the executive level, this was a very momentous week, something approaching 30 executive orders signed in the first 2 days, and many of those centering around energy. And I'll just mention a couple right here that you should be aware of. First is the presidential memorandum implementing a regulatory freeze. This is a very common executive order, has become tradition for modern administrations. This one is actually a little less broad than the 2017 memorandum from Trump. It directs agencies to stop any regulatory rulemakings, or regulatory actions that were ongoing at the time of the transfer of power. And that includes a couple things. For example, like the sage grouse or something, is a endangered species that is very close to solar development out west. That rule's gone. There's a couple other things impacting solar. It's not clear the domestic content guidance document that was recently published. That's not a final rule. This is up in the air, but basically any rule that wasn't published yet could be invalidated by this memorandum. Next is the big one that I want to mention. Unleashing American Energy is the title of this executive order. And this is a broad, I can probably drop this in the chat, I think, and I'll go ahead and do that. And I see your comments piling up there. If I get to the end of my presentation, I can try to answer a few, otherwise we'll do it at the end. Okay, so this executive order has a paragraph in it. There's a paragraph on electric vehicles, which they're clearly targeting, not just on tax policy, but on infrastructure. This one, entitled Unleashing American Energy, has a paragraph specifically entitled Terminating the Green New Deal. And the Green New Deal there is the IRA. They're choosing to link those concepts. And what it does here is pauses disbursement of funds under the IRA and the IIJA. That's the infrastructure bill from several years ago. And this is based on a controversial presidential authority called impoundment authority. Controversial because for various reasons, one of which is if you're a grant recipient and you've got a grant contract, I mean that violates the contracts clause hypothetically. So this is likely to get a court challenge, but is very sweeping nonetheless. And basically what it means is like any funds not dispersed already under a validly passed appropriation and act of Congress can be held back under the president's so-called impoundment authority. So we'll see where this goes. Huge reaction to this when it came out the other day, and the OMB has already, I think yesterday, already issued a memo trying to claw this back a little bit and say, no, this just applies to certain things. The last one I want to mention here before we get to budget reconciliation is this energy emergency declaration. Curiously enough, solar is not mentioned, although wind really took it on the chin this week. There's an executive order temporarily halting federal approval of new wind farms on federal land and anything requiring a federal permit. Go to the next slide here, Eric, and I know I'm going over time, so I'll quickly address this. What can we say about budget reconciliation? This is the chosen vehicle. Once Congress has, once the Republicans have all their representatives seated, they're going to try to repeal the IRA one way or the other. The House favors this one big, beautiful bill approach, and Speaker Johnson is there in Trump's camp. And Majority Leader Thune, who, typically the Senate has a little extra distance from the president, a little more cautious. They might favor an approach that racks up some easy wins early on, and they see that the tax code is a little bit more complex and controversial, so maybe they'll try to go for some appropriations first and come back to get the taxes later. But there's a lot to consider here. They're not going to be able to get this done quick because they have to wait for their other members to be seated probably. But who knows, if they really go big on immigration and they try to sweep up hundreds of thousands of people and deport them, what do the markets do there? They have to get California wildfire relief. Does that hold everything up? They have to, they're going to take action on tariffs. All of these things, all three of these things could be inflationary in nature. And if inflation starts to become a concern and other economic factors, are you going to be able to pass a bill that's, trying to claw back a bunch of opportunities for energy? Not to mention the need for energy. Basically, the U.S. is going to have to double its electricity capacity over the next 10 years to be able to serve the growth of electric vehicles, the growth of AI and servers and everything. And you're probably not going to want to be limiting yourself, especially on wind power, which is extremely cheap, not to mention solar. So it's clearly a priority for the party, for the president, but there will be some major challenges for them to get it done. So how big of a priority is it? We don't know yet. And I don't know if I had one more slide or not, Eric. I think that brings me to the end there. Oh, the last thing, please take your phone out and zap this QR code here. As I said, this is an all hands on deck situation. If you have an interest, your business has an interest in making sure that the ITC does not go away and all the other pieces of the IRA, we need companies. SEIA can only do so much. Your local SEIA affiliate, MOSEIA, can only do so much. We really need you in particular to consider doing a site visit for members of Congress, or at the very least do a sign-on letter and put your business out there on one side or the other. So yes, please save this QR code. It'll bring you to an advocacy checklist. You can print that out, put it next to your desk, make sure you're addressing things on it over the next couple weeks. We really need your help. So thanks a lot, and look forward to answering questions in a bit.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for that great overview on federal policy and all of it. A lot of activity going on there in Washington, D.C. So we really appreciate having you here in St. Louis to answer these questions here. I'm going to kind of switch up the screen here. Let's see, bear with me on the technology here, and we will go to Mr. Dolan's presentation. Right here. Again, I want to say how much we're excited to have John Dolan, and you'll get from his enthusiasm how great of a executive director he is for our trade association, Missouri Solar Energy Association. StraightUp Solar is really proud to be part of this statewide organization whose mission is to provide advocacy, education, events, outreach, training to members and stakeholders for the advancement and growth of solar energy in the state of Missouri. And again, it's really great for our company to be associated with other companies all around the state who have signed a pledge to abide by a code of ethics. That means that we will be working on behalf of the customer's interest, providing transparent, clear, and understandable information, and making sure that we service and install with all the right ethics. And so putting the customer forward is the mission of MOSEIA. And we have a great leader, John Dolan, to make sure that we are all following the code of ethics and putting solar in the best light here. So with that, let me turn it over to John and talk about what's going to happen in Jefferson City this year. Oh, John, you're muted.
Thank you, Eric, and all of you for joining us. What a great turnout. We can't do it without customers and advocates like all of you, and I certainly learned that from the great citizens of Wildwood and all the good things we hear from folks that call us with their awesome educations, their understanding of clean energy, and their commitment to solar through being a straight-up customer, to supporting MOSEIA's efforts, or just to believing and understanding the all of the above generator energy solution or the clean energy solution and how much we need that to be a part of all these solutions. You were coming into a big football weekend. We're coming out of a big bunch of politics with new administration, state and others. So you hear a lot about great hires. You hear a lot about great draft picks, and nobody could be better than the fact that Renew Missouri's Andrew Linhares was drafted or pulled in and hired by SEIA. So he is my director of state affairs now at SEIA, and controls or works in the states we're talking about tonight and many others. So it's really neat to do that. I'm still learning from him more and more every day. I love that it's a young industry, but also that it's got a history since 2007. And one of the big things that happened in addition to renewable energy credits is that great companies like StraightUp and founders there like Dane and Aaron and people like Eric have been promoting the good things along with Andrew and his former boss, James Owen, in the Renewable Energy Credit Initiative, and before that, the 2007 law on net metering. It is a great, as we discussed today earlier on a call, a great thing that Missouri has that right to interconnect. I don't mean to overstate the Armageddon, but we faced a situation in anti-net metering legislation from Missouri's kind of bullying co-ops. Love what they do when they do it in their world, but when they come into ours, they're very, very upset that solar is now under $3 a kilowatt hour average and not 8, and they're noticing us and trying to put us out of business. The bills listed 370, 940, and 467 do exactly that. They did it to Arkansas, and MOSEIA got a lot of new members doing a lot more business in Missouri than Arkansas, and other states have to wait to interconnect, and what their bill does is basically come out, and it's been at us, the exact same version for my tenure in the last 3 sessions, and before that in different versions to undo a deal that was done years ago. In this particular example, not to give them too much credit, Ameren and Evergy and Liberty all have better online portals, better net metering, and are more open to a piece of their pie chart being solar. I like to tell my members when I'm being funny or real, and I do both a lot, is that Ameren loves solar when it's their solar, but they also deal well in the under 500 kilowatt size when you're trying to do it for your business and others. And Evergy in particular is good with people that help us a lot more than the less sophisticated municipal utilities in the rural areas and the rural electric co-ops who are absolutely opposed to us. So their bills must be defeated again. Tie goes to the defense in politics. And we had a 7-7 vote in the utility committee last year, and we defeated that bill. We're being seen as the ones who want to have a creative solution, want to talk business. Of course, like SEIA, we've also pivoted our argument away from certain aspects of partisan clean energy and into what will sell. I have spent an entire career after my 9-10 years in the legislature and political life, now as 19th year as a trade association exec, formerly in healthcare, selling blue issues to red leaders and bipartisan activities with many governors, mostly served under Democrats. And I worked it the best. So competence, enthusiasm, creative solutions work on both sides of the aisle, both sides of the table, and with great groups like MOSEIA. Your help helps us by advocating. So thank you for all of you. We're going to have a great solar advocacy day. This net metering defense is first and foremost, just like the Chiefs will need against the Bills this weekend. You have to have that defense to win a Super Bowl, and it's important to not let them gut the Net Metering Easy Connection Act. Typically speaking, every provision they see does exactly that. It decimates, and it lets them determine who can install it. It lets them charge any fees. And there's a rural electric co-op in Southwest Missouri that it did a huge demand fee and struck at the heart of solar savings by doing that. And you've all seen the time of use misuse of the term time of use to raise their fees. And there are fee increases from sewer and electric and gas all before the commission right now. So we partner with our friends in fighting some of that and fighting for consumers. We need to be able to interconnect and fairly and effectively have rooftop solar and beyond. Next slide, please. Defending against net metering means also showing what we would like, and Illinois is closer to where we are. I know there's a lot of changes, and no state is perfect, but it's certainly a better example. And Kansas had a small win to go from nothing to something last year, while Arkansas took it on the chin and went from something very good, like us, B+ or better, all the way back down to a D or an F, and they're being restricted. And utilities are allowed to do so many things. So what do our pro-net metering bills do? They establish a statewide solar permit, one of the best ideas. What did I learn from the great Andrew Linhares and Renew recently before he left for SEIA? We are regulating our utilities and co-ops, not just through their local boards, but in the terms of net metering and service area changes. The PSC is in charge of that. So we think the PSC should do more and establish a permit, because what did I learn from my own board members who are technically and craftsman-wise real high quality? That they're calling out certain panels and certain brands, and they're trying to trip us up with about 120 different entities saying no to solar throughout Missouri and calling out a certain panel or a certain thing or a certain upgrade. We can't let them do that. And this consistent permit can really tie it in to safety, consistency, workmanship. Take it out of the statute, push it to the rule, and fight it out at the commission where it's more fair and effective for this. And then your favorite issue, if you're citizens aplenty and StraightUp Solar customers, the HOA restrictions. They are in law thanks to MOSEIA's efforts and Renew Missouri and all of you, and they are working. But what about the city and the county? What about the aesthetic and the no front facing? We're trying to tighten that up. It's a hard fought fight, but that's in the net metering nirvana bill that we support. And also we can expand the caps. Barry County Electric Cooperative is out there saying no more net metering. And they're saying that you've reached a 5% cap, yet they haven't issued a report. They haven't proven it. And it should be higher than 5%. We should grow that. And this bill does that. Also, like Illinois, we should allow more. Now, we know that Evergy, Liberty, and Ameren have no problem going up to 500 kilowatts. After that, you got to have a few meetings. But even up to a megawatt should be possible, even for the credit system. So let's get there. And that's what the pro-net metering bills do. We have our champions, believe it or not. Even members of the Freedom Caucus, the very, very, very conservative people, are actually on our side because the individual rights issue is playing so well. And we have to continue to emphasize that. And my daughter works for a leading Democrat, and she is consumer protection. We use either argument to get home. Next slide, please. Another thing you need to do to get home is to find a workable solution. I did this when representing long-term healthcare providers, pushing quality, pushing other things in a tough, tough business, and trying to get a bunch of conservatives or Democrats in tougher, easy, rare budget years to fund Medicaid and Medicare. Same way, we need to be funded for a value of solar study to prove the money issue, and we need to do certain things. So what's a middle of the road approach, and what can we do? Well, we've drafted a proposal that tries to thread the needle, and we want to raise that maximum service area capacity limit 1% each year to get to at least 10%. That'll take care of everybody if we do it right. We want that solar permit as previously described. It will leave it all to a good rule, and it will stay current on the right panels, the right equipment, the right workmanship standards, working with our friends in the trades to who should be able to do what and where, and not just taking it from a utility manager or an energy services coordinator at the co-ops and munis who did it the same way all the time and just doesn't want to change the way he does business, or making people in Iron County literally drill through iron and trench 1,000 feet to the pole for the rapid shutdown when it should be a note at the pole and it should be located on the house. That adds thousands to your job. And that's the kind of things we could get through and not allow 120 different entities if we have a solar permit. And then we can also raise the cap up to 500 kilowatts AC. If you look at standard baseload generation issues and power management, nobody should have an argument up to 500 kilowatt AC. And after that, they should follow SGIP for small generation rules and regs. And then after that, in big solar, it's FERC, and it's PURPA. So we need to realize when the attorney should be in the room and when the consumer should rule the room and the engineer should have a comment, and we need to balance that. We could do that with at least 500 kilowatt AC. We also, as Eric talked about, are very proud at MOSEIA of board relations and interactions, and years of work has gone into a registered solar contractor database and reasonable consumer protections for you when we have not lived up to our end of the bargain. One of the things about contractor that I understand is that I used to sign the certifications of every certified nurse assistant on a contract with the state through my healthcare for long-term care. And we used to run that database and run those licenses, if you would, for those people for the state. We can do the same thing so you know who the contractor is. With StraightUp Solar, you know that Eric's there, Dane's there, your salesman is available. You can get to them. They have a website. They have insurance. They have good quality workmanship. They do all these things. They commit to these extra things. They sustain our industry. Well, sadly, we all don't do that, and some are fly by night, and I've been dealing with a lot of that. And we need to agree to reasonable consumer protections, and the Attorney General, the 5-day rescission rule instead of 3, and some contract provisions in finance, sales, service, and installation that protect you, the customer. That's low-hanging fruit in the opinion of Ryan McDonald, the president of MOSEIA, and we can be for that because we've got enough good quality providers to help you that'll agree to that. And we've already fought it out amongst ourselves what should be in that bill. Then finally, we could give an interconnection fee by size of your system. If you're under 20 kilowatts, 25, you should be maybe $250, $350 for up to 100, and after 100 to 500, maybe a $500 thing. The co-ops and munis are running around with the myth, I think, of the cost shift, the cost of solar. And they won't show their books, and they won't prove it out with a value of solar or a distributive energy resources study. We should fund that study, provide a fee in the meantime, and then negotiate. If there really is a cost, it's no more than 5%. And that one-to-one credit you get, maybe we negotiate a deal, but it's never going to be more than a few points. And we can do this like other states have and be better. And this compromise is a workable solution that does that. Next slide. So we're doing the right thing. We're trying to improve the sector, and we're trying to do things that bring accountability, quality, and transparency to consumers. We're trying to bring reasonable consumer protections. We're trying to negotiate so that we can get the spirit of the 2007 law that MOSEIA and many of you were behind, and StraightUp was behind. We can finally expand it after 19 years. It's worked really well. We got a great interconnection right, even at avoided cost in Missouri. That gets done pretty good compared to other states. But after that, we start to lose. So we need to work hard to improve ourselves and then also expand it. Next slide, please. And then, of course, it brings me to the great subject of community solar, one of the best areas, and that federal money we talked about, $156 or $8 million coming in solar for all. What if you live in the city? What if you have a row house? What if you don't own your house? What if you don't have it? Community solar is something great. And I like to say, like I said earlier, that Ameren loves solar if they love their own. Well, they also have their own community solar programs. We applaud them for that, but it's not as good as third party with real developed systems and real senses of communities. Think credit unions with a purpose versus banks. And think of the opportunity for consumers if we really expand community solar. Thankfully, last year we had the first hearing in Missouri ever, and we had it allowed in the hearing. We had a great thing, and we had the Coalition for Community Solar Access showing up on time and with reckless abandon, have a lobbyist, and we had the great hearing for it. And with Solar for All and the stakeholder meetings that StraightUp Solar and myself and Andrew and James are all going to be a part of, we're going to see what that kind of money, if it doesn't get cut off by the feds, we're going to see what enabling legislation and money and a pilot program can do in community solar. We're also fighting the good fight in large-scale solar. It isn't easy, but we're working those rural issues and those land use issues, and we're really standing up tall. So I'd love to take your questions on net metering and community solar and consumer protection, hear about your experience, answer your questions along with Andrew, and I appreciate you having me here today, and I hope that I stayed under the time limit there, Eric.
You sure did, John. That was very good. And I have to say, this is probably the only solar webinar where you're going to hear a discussion about the sage grouse and the Kansas City Chiefs defense. So we got a real treat tonight here. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, John. Andrew Linhares from SEIA, the National Organization for Solar Energy. John Dolan from MOSEIA, the Missouri Solar Energy Association. Again, I'm Eric Schneider with StraightUp Solar. If you have any questions, again, about Illinois policy, you can email me directly. I'll get back to you soon. And again, I hope you join us on February 19th with our founder and president, Dr. Dane Glick, giving his outlook for 2025. And again, Shannon Fulton, Illinois Solar Energy Association board member and our vice president of pre-construction here at StraightUp Solar, talking about what's going to happen in Springfield. So with that, I'll wish you all a great good night. And again, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, John. This is a lot of fun. Great dialogue back and forth. And I hope we can do it again maybe in 2026.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.